Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for having me today and for coming along to the session. I'm really excited to be here. And I hope this is going to be informative and helpful for you. And as Rachel said, we can have some questions at the end, to save them up, and we'll have a nice chat afterwards. So I promise that I won't go on and on and on with slides. I know you sound like you've all been on lots of Zoom calls, and I don't want to give you a death by PowerPoint experience. So hopefully this will stay nice and jazzy for you. So as Rachel said, my name is Emily and I am the Community Partnerships Manager, and I work for the Census and the Office for National Statistics, who run the Census. And I'm going to talk to you about what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks and months with the census process, and why it's really important that you need to get involved, and some of the support that's out there to help you get involved with it. So if we can have the next slide, please, Rachel.
Now, see, this is where the downfall happens. There we go.
I think you can just use your keyboard buttons like forward and backward, the arrow ones, if that helps.
Like that, but we'll try and try and keep it going.
Yeah, no, whatever works for you, I'm happy. So what I'm going to go over today for you, I'm going to give you a little overview of what the census is and why it's important. I'm going to tell you about what we're doing differently for 2021 census. So I don't know if any of you remember doing census in other years, but I'm going to tell you exactly how it's going to work this time round. I'm going to talk to you about the census support, including your easy read that we're producing. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the kind of engagement work that we're doing, and also tell you exactly what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks and months, so you know what to expect. So next slide, please. And the next one, please. Okay, so some of you might be wondering, what is the census? So the census is a survey that happens every 10 years, and everybody takes part in it. The Office for National Statistics, and we shorten that to ONS to make it easy, is responsible for the census in England and Wales. So that means we'll be helping people do the census in England and in Wales, and in Northern Ireland and Scotland, they have their own census and they're run by their own statistics authorities. Scotland has delayed their census for a year because of coronavirus, but Northern Ireland will be doing theirs at the same time as us. And the census is really important because it gives us the most detailed information about our society. It asks a lot of questions about how you live and about who you are and characteristics about you, but that's because we really need to understand the makeup of our population and what people need. So if we have the next slide, please. So why do we need to do it? I will go into a little bit more detail here. So one of really important reasons that we have a census is because all of that data that we collect from asking you questions provides information that the government and lots of other organisations need to do a number of things. So it's used to shape policy. So that is where, you know, the government and other departments will look at, you know, how to make decisions and plan, and what rules and regulations to put in place to help the population. They also look at census information to understand where they should be spending money and where they should allocate resources. They also look at it to understand where they should plan services, so things like bus routes and roads and tube lines and things like that. And they also use it to monitor equality. So we ask questions about characteristics of people so that we can understand the makeup of our society, and we can compare that information to different things like qualifications and employment, to understand, you know, where there might be dips and areas of deprivation or areas of issues with equality. So if we have the next slide, please. So there's lots of other things census data can help with. So it can help with education. Obviously, schools will use census data in things like looking at statistics and maths, but it's also really important to understand the number of young people in the population. So, you know, if we have a picture of the people of all the different ages they are, we know which people are going to be needing a secondary school next, and, you know, which people are going to have just been born and are going to need a nursery or a primary school soon. People look at the data to understand healthcare. So there are some questions on there about people's health, and that's used to understand, you know, where do they need more doctor surgeries, or where does the NHS need to kind of put more money in. It will also help us, or help the government and other organisations understand housing. So, you know, if you understand how many people live in England and Wales, and you understand different things about them, like how old they are and what they do, then you'll need to know, you know, where are they going to want to live? Where do new houses need to be built? And I've mentioned public services, but obviously it's used to, you know, everything from your 999 calls all the way through to, you know, building new roads and things like that. We need to understand where everybody is and what they're doing. So we know that, so people who put these things in place know where to target and do those things to help everyone. Transport, you know, as I mentioned, bus routes, if any of you get the buses, or if any of you, you know, drive regularly, or even use taxis and things like that, adding in bus lanes and taxi lanes, understanding where people cycle to, if they cycle to work, and so on. It's really important information the census collects on those kinds of questions, and then that can be used to make sure that everybody has access to the things they need to get around. And then things like demographics, which means like the characteristics of people and understanding the makeup of our society, all the different groups and populations, so that we know what different people need. So if we have the next slide, please. So Census 2021, the next one, please. Okay, so here's some facts about census in the year 2021. So the next census will take place very soon on Sunday, the 21st of March, 2021. And for the first time, this will be an online first census. But don't worry, paper opportunities, so paper questionnaires of the survey will be available for those people who'd like to use that instead. And we've also been focusing on engaging with everybody, including underrepresented and hard to reach groups. We want to make sure we get the census message to everyone and make sure everyone has everything they need to get involved. So if we have the next slide, please. And there's a couple of really important things I'd like to tell you here, and that is about the fact that we keep your personal information safe. So before we take any of the data that we get and make it into statistics, we make sure that it doesn't include any personal information. So yes, we do ask you questions like what your name is and what your address is, and we ask you questions about characteristics about yourself, but don't worry, this data will never be used to identify you. If you imagine your name getting sliced off all the facts that you give us, and nobody gets to see that whole individual record on its own. All the numbers and all the hard facts that you give us get put in a pot with all the other data from everybody else, and that's used as lots of statistics and numbers to understand the population. It's not used to look anybody up or find anybody, or and it's never given to kind of the Home Office or anybody like that to search for anyone. Your data is completely anonymous, and we make sure that nothing is released in any way to the public that will allow people to use the data to find you. And the information we collect from the census remains completely anonymous for 100 years, and then it becomes a public record. So if any of you have ever done family history, looked at your family trees, used Ancestry or Find My Past, you'll know that they work with the National Archives, which is the government's archive organisation, and that is where the census records go when they're history, when we're all gone, and it becomes part of the public record, and people can use it to look up genealogy and other kinds of history and things like that. As some of you already know, but the census is really important, and we all must complete it. So legislation made the modern census a legal obligation, meaning that we've all got to do it. And that happened in 1920. So since 1920, by law, we all have to take part in the census. So next page, please. So I've mentioned it being online, and I just want to kind of go over some reasons why that's a good thing. So first of all, it does make it a little bit easier and quicker if you are able to do it online. So if any of you seen a paper questionnaire before, it's got the same questions as the online version, but obviously you have to kind of follow the instructions to get from one question to another. Whereas if you're doing it online, you'll just get shown each question one by one that you need to answer. And if your answer that you give means that, you know, you get to skip a question and move on to another one, you won't have to navigate that yourself. It will just present you with each question that you need to answer one by one. So it's a lot easier to take in. You can complete it on any kind of device that has a screen and Wi-Fi, so tablets or desktop computers and laptops or mobile phones. You can stop while you're doing your census and go back later and finish it off if you need a break or you need to go and find out a piece of information. It means that we'll be able to get data out to the public to use again faster. So normally it takes a couple of years to scan in all the paper returns and make it into kind of digital data that we can then put out for the public to use. However, we're aiming to get the first batches of data out only a year after this census. So in about a year's time, we'll be starting to release census data, which is really quick and really good because it means that it's going to stay relevant for everybody and, you know, mean a lot more, because at the moment, the data from the last census in 2011 is now 10 years old. So lots of things has changed since then. The quicker we get the data out, the more meaning it has. And we also have a function in the online census where if you're filling in a field where you can write something in, some of those questions have something called search as you type. So this is a little bit like when you type something into a Google search engine and it comes up with suggestions of what you're typing in. And it will do that for some of the questions in the census, which makes it easier for you to kind of like find an answer with some of the things that you might be saying. So if we have the next slide, please. We also have a couple of new questions. So this is the first time for 2021 that we will have asked questions about armed forces leavers, so veterans. We'll also be asking voluntary questions about gender identity and sexual orientation. Those two questions only get asked for people who are 16 years old and over. And we also have in the ethnicity question a new tick box for Roma people. If someone feels they identify as Roma, there is a box to tick there for that option. So if we have the next question, please. No, next question, what am I talking about? Next slide. There we go. And it's important for everyone to know as well, depending on how where you live and how you live, you could be contacted with the census in two different ways. So if you live in a household, and that's either on your own or with people, you'll get a letter asking you to take part in the census, or sometimes if you live in an area where there's not much use of the internet, so you're really rural or something, you might get a questionnaire as your first way to respond. And you'll need to answer questions about the accommodation that you live in and about yourself. And when we talk about a household, we mean that you live in any kind of like flat or house where you share cooking facilities and you kind of share a front door with people. If you live in a communal establishment, and that's things like a residential home where you have a manager and you just have a room, then you'll be getting a questionnaire and you'll just need to answer about yourself. So if we have the next slide, please. So census support, and the next one, please. So we want to make sure that the census is accessible and inclusive, and we've put a lot of support measures in place to try and help everybody. So as I've already mentioned, there will be paper versions of the census form available. If you receive a letter and you would rather do your census on a paper form instead of online, then there will be a telephone number and the website address that you can go to from the letter where you'll be able to order a paper questionnaire instead. You can get that paper questionnaire in large print if you would like as well. There's also, if anyone needs Braille, there is a Braille guidance booklet that you can order from our contact centre, and that tells people about the census and also gives a translation of the questionnaire. We also have accessible videos which have audio of all of the questionnaire, the letter, a leaflet that comes with the letter, and a privacy statement. And those videos have BSL on them and subtitles as well. So if you like to listen to what you're reading at the same time, you'll be able to play those videos while you're doing the online census. And if you want to, you can probably listen to them while you do the paper one as well. There's also an easy read leaflet, and I'll show you some little examples of easy read in just a moment, and you'll be able to get hold of that through our contact centre. And also if any of your organisations work either with myself and Learning Disabilities England, or with anyone else that we have working on local engagement all across England and Wales, they'll be able to email you copies of the leaflet as well. We have a text relay service in our contact centre, and so if anyone's not sure what that is, if you are hard of hearing or deaf and you prefer to have text conversations, you just put a couple of numbers, so a prefix in front of the contact centre telephone, and you'll be able to have a text conversation instead. Our electronic questionnaire, so if you're doing the census online and you're doing the online questionnaire, lots of work's gone into that to make sure that it's compatible with assistive technology. So if anyone uses Zoom technology or screen readers to help them online, the website and the census questionnaire should be easy to use with the software that you've got. There's also something called online guidance. So this is where we've tried to think of all the possible questions and all the possible things that people would like to know about census, why we ask questions, what we mean by certain questions, what to do in certain situations, how you can help people, how other people can help you. And we've provided answers to all of that on our website, and that's all written to a reading age of 8. And again, it should be easy to use with any kind of accessible, compatible technology that you have. We also have translation booklets of the questionnaire. So if anybody finds that English isn't their first language and they operate in a different language, then there'll be some booklets to help understand the questionnaire. And there's also a telephone line specifically to help with people if they're speaking another language and they'd like some help as well, they can get an appointment and have a translated conversation. So next slide, please. So our support services, so I've mentioned the public contact centre. I've mentioned that you can have a text relay conversation with the public contact centre, but of course you can also get advisor support. The contact centre runs web chat, so you'll be able to have like a web chat message conversation. I've mentioned the language line, and where necessary, people will be able to complete the census over the phone with help from trained staff via our free phone contact centre number. The contact centre number will go live on Monday. So I can't share it just yet because if you call it, there won't be anyone there to pick up the phone. However, I'm making sure that Lisa and Rachel have it so that they can share it with you guys as soon as possible on Monday when everything goes live, just in case you've got any questions. There will be some walk-in census support centres within the community. So obviously this is a little bit dependent on how quickly things unlock, as it were, from lockdown. Because Boris's announcement was literally just last night, I can't say exactly how things are going to open up again for these centres. But essentially what they are is we've worked with the Good Things Foundation. So if any of you haven't heard of them, they're a charity that try and help with people who might be digitally excluded. And they have developed a network of centres, and they've recruited all sorts of different community centres, libraries and other locations across England and Wales. And those centres will offer people the opportunity to go in face to face and get some help from an advisor, use the internet or the technology they have there if you don't have it at home or if you don't feel confident. And if you do have a paper questionnaire and want some help, you can take it with you to one of these centres and they'll help you fill it out as well. So there's the online support I've mentioned in the terms of the guidance and information, and there's also census field staff. So these are all sorts of different staff working in the field, as in out amongst the community rather than back at ONS head offices, and they're there to help people do the census. So I'll talk a little bit more about them in just a moment. So if we have the next slide, please. So I promised I'd tell you a bit more about Easy Read. So on the right hand side, we've got the front cover of the Easy Read information leaflet that will be available as soon as the contact centre goes live on Monday. So that's a little sneak preview there for you. I've been through it with Lisa, and it tells you things like what the census is, why it's important, what you need to do to complete the census, what's going to happen. It gives you all the contact telephone numbers and help, and shows you how to get started filling out the form. We've also turned that leaflet into a PowerPoint so that it can be shown as a presentation to groups of people, because although as we move into this space where things are going to be kind of taken out of lockdown, obviously the kind of work that I'm doing with you guys, like this engagement work where we're doing sessions and information and answering questions, we'll still have to do a lot of that online because obviously we can't meet in big groups. So before COVID, my job, I went out and I met with lots of people and did lots of kind of conferences and presentations. Obviously all of that now is done online, and we'll carry on doing it online as we go through to help people and stay safe. So our engagement staff working in the field have this presentation and would be more than happy to work with all your local organisations to present it and share that information. So hopefully something that will be something quite useful to people. So if we have the next slide, please. So I've mentioned the paper questionnaire. This just gives you a very brief example. So this is like a specimen example of what the front cover of the questionnaire looks like. And this is available for anyone who'd rather take part on paper, but it also does have, it will come with a code on it. So if you want to complete online and you get a paper form instead, you still have the option to do it. It has a little access code that you enter onto the website to get started. So if we have the next slide, please. Lovely. So I've just done a little summary of the support that might be useful for you here. So we've got the easy read information leaflet, we've got the presentation and support from local engagement staff. We have the accessible videos with audio and subtitles, so you can listen to versions of the letter and the information leaflet and all the questions. We want to make sure that there's support available for family and friends. So there's information in our online guidance about how family and friends can help people take part, or maybe even help people do the census and take their answers for them. The contact centre opens on the 1st of March, so that's on Monday. And the website as well has got lots of help on it. So I've put the link to the website with the help page link for you on that there. That is linked, so you should be able to click it, I think, or you know, we can reshare that link to you so it's live. But the Census website is live, so you can go and have a look at that help area and so on, and see what some of it's going to look like. It's just the contact centre that doesn't open until Monday. So if we have the next slide, please. So census engagement, so next one. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the local engagement staff that are working all around the country. So they do things very much like what I'm doing with you guys here, but they're there to work with lots of local organisations. They all have a little geographical patch. They have an area of the map, and that's where they work, and they want to work specifically with local organisations to support people to take part in the census, make sure they know what's happening, and give a much more one-on-one experience with it than I'm able to, kind of sitting in the office. Well, not in the office at the moment, but sitting in headquarters, as it were. So they're out there working with communities and organisations. If any of you represent groups or have any more specific questions, they'd love to get in touch so I can help arrange that. But they build local relationships, they reassure people and communicate about what's going on. They support census completion. So when you're doing your census, they will set up activities to help people take part. They will collaborate with anyone who works in a group to support people. And they're called census engagement managers, and they're reaching out, as I said, to local organisations. And I'll tell you how to get in touch with them in just a moment. So if we have the next slide, please. So what happens next? This is the key bit, I think. So there's a couple of things, first of all, we can think about, like if you want to help your community, or you want to help even your next door neighbour or anything like that, there's a number of things that you can think about doing. So you can help raise awareness of the census. You can just let people know it's happening in a conversation. The more people you chat to and say, oh, by the way, census is happening, the better. It helps spread the word. We also have, if you watch any kind of any of the big TV stations, or anything at all, actually, we're starting to do lots of advertising as well. So some of you might already have seen a census advert, but you'll notice hopefully those kinds of things increasing over the next couple of weeks. You can tell people how to take part. You can let them know it's online or paper. They've got their options. There's lots of resources, as well as things like Easy Read. There's also lots of social media posts. There's lots of leaflets and posters and things like that we've tried to create, and they're all available on our website. And where it's underlined in the PowerPoint is actually a little link to that area of the website. I can send it to Lisa and Rachel again separately if anyone needs that. You can do if you're on social media, you can post and you can put information on any channels that you have if you've got followers or community groups, or you can @Census 2021, and that's our channels, and I'll make sure my team look out for anyone @ing us and kind of sharing any posts and things like that. You can also motivate your community, or any stakeholders that you work with, or any clients. You can say, come on, let's do this, it's really important. You can support people to complete their census if you've done it, or if you feel pretty confident, you can let people know about what the options are. If you're friends and families with anybody who you think might need some help, we all need to get together and support each other to take part. And you can contact us to find out who your local census engagement manager is. So I've got an email address at the end of this presentation, which you can get in touch with, and I can tell you where your local census engagement manager is if you just let me know the town or the area that you're in. I can send you their email address or CC them into a conversation, and you can work with them more closely. So next slide, please. So more specifically, what happens next? So from this week onwards, you might have already received it, but everybody will receive a postcard telling them that Census is coming and it's going to happen very soon. From next week onwards, from Monday onwards, people will start to receive their letters in the post that will ask them to take part. Once you've received your letter, you can do your census straight away. The letter will have a code on it. You just need to go to the website and press start and type in your code, and then you're inside your form. And we will continue to share information. So the telephone number, help pages, and easy read information, easy read leaflet with LDE. So that information will keep coming towards all of you. So if we have the next page, please. Thank you. This is an example of the letter, so you know what to expect. So it will look quite a lot like this when it comes through the post. It comes with a leaflet that tells you about the census. It comes with a privacy statement that just tells you kind of all the legal stuff about what you need to know. Both the letter, the leaflet, and the legal piece of information are all kind of covered. There's a video, one of the accessible videos goes through them and reads them out to you if you'd prefer to listen to it. But you can see in the kind of coloured bit in the middle of the page there, you can see there's a little code in a box. That's what your code will look like, and that's what you need to enter into the Census website to get started on your questionnaire. So we say that Census is Sunday the 21st of March, but essentially as soon as you get your letter, you can do your questionnaire even if it's not the 21st of March yet. We say a particular census day to give a date for people to kind of think about, to give them a point to work towards. So if we have the next slide, please. This is an example of the postcard that's coming this week. If any of you already received it, you might recognise this. If not, it's just a simple A5 postcard, and it's just to let you know that Census is coming. You don't need to do anything with it. It's just to help let the country know that this is about to happen, and to look out for the letter that will come from next week onwards. So you might not get the letter straight away on the Monday. It could be at some point later, but it will start happening from Monday onwards. So if we have the next slide, please. So this is how you stay in touch and find out a bit more. So that's the email address there that you need to contact if you want to know who your local census engagement manager is. So that's 2021 census.engagement@ons.gov.uk. But obviously this is in the slides and will get shared with you anyway, so you can pick it up again later. And we do have a newsletter that we'll be putting up out updates about census processes and things like that. So either of those things you can get involved with. So next slide, please. There we go. That is a brief run through of all things census for you. So shall we take some questions?
Okay, can we start with the questions that have come through on the chat, Emily, first?
Yeah.
So first of all, we've got Anna, who had a question about Easy Read. Anna, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, I was just wondering why the actual questionnaire wasn't produced in Easy Read and instead there was an accompanying document to go with it, because the questionnaires are quite confusing anyway. So I was just wondering why that was decided.
Yeah, no, I completely understand your question, and legally we're only allowed to produce the questionnaire in English and Welsh. There's real limitations on, because it's effectively a bit of a legal document, we have to only produce it in those specific formats. So we're quite limited on what the questionnaire can then look like, and that's why we have to produce information to go alongside it to try and explain it, rather than too much changes to the document itself. So it's certainly something that otherwise we would have been able to consider, but we're just not allowed to edit it in that fashion. And that's why, of course, as well, we need to make sure if anyone's using any of the guidance, like the language guidance booklets, you still have to fill out the census questionnaire in English or in Welsh, even if you're looking at a different booklet. And that's because, again, it's a specific document that has to be answered in a specific way. However, rest assured, there are very few questions where you actually have to write something in. The majority of them are ticking something or marking a box. And as you say, yes, the paper questionnaire itself can look a little bit daunting. I do take that, but if you get a chance when you get your code, have a feel for the online questionnaire. Even if you're going to do it on paper, try and have a look if you want to, because it's a much smoother experience. You don't have to self-navigate through anything. You just get one clean, accessible page with a question on it for you to answer, and it will have a little it will have some information. So if you're not sure what the question means, you can click a little twisty and it will drop down and tell you a bit more about the question. So it's much more like paced, like one thing at a time, rather than seeing lots of pages open in front of you.
Emily, would it be possible to have a copy sent to us of that guidance? I work for a self-advocacy charity for adults with learning disabilities, and because of the lockdown, it's unlikely they're going to be able to meet with an officer to get one-to-one support, but because we know them quite well, we might be able to support them over Zoom, for example, if we had a copy of the guidance to talk it through with them as well.
Sure. So what I can do is I can send you, I'll via Lisa and Co, you'll have the links to the website and everything anyway. It's on the presentation, so that gives you all of the online guidance, all of the why do we ask this, how does it work. As soon as you've got your code, somebody can go into their questionnaire. What I would say, it's very important that you don't share your code with anybody because it's for your specific household. So if you're wanting to demo any areas, I'd encourage you to work with the census engagement managers, because they can kind of join any Zoom calls that you're doing like this, and they've been prepped and trained to kind of do sessions to help take people through elements of the questionnaire and explain it and answer questions and things like that. We're also in the process of finalising some how-to videos as well, which will be very plain demos of areas of the questionnaire, like how you put your code in and click next, and there's some examples of the different questions where you might type an answer in and where you might click an answer and things like that. So as soon as that's ready, it will just be a plain video with nothing really spoken over it, but we're hoping to be able to give out like a script with it in case people want to talk through it with any colleagues or clients, so we can make sure you have access to that as soon as it's available too.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, we, Learning Disability England, will be putting a news page up on our website early next week with all the links that Emily has given us to make it easier for people as well. Okay, so the next question was Hayley, who had a question about local contact people. Hayley, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure what's happening, sorry. Annette, I think that might be you. Could you go on mute? I don't seem to be able to mute you.
Yeah, we just as an organisation, we work for a called Speak Up, self-advocacy in Rotherham. In Rotherham, and we contacted the census team a few weeks ago, but we haven't really had any other information about how to connect with the local census team. So I'm just wondering how.
The local team, yeah, of course. So the email address at the end of the presentation, if you email that directly, I will go into our big master spreadsheet and I will look up the census engagement manager in Rotherham and I will put them in the email with you and say, please will you work with Hayley, and we'll go straight from there. So
yeah, because I'm just thinking about like as well our local BAME groups as well. So we know a few like Razia and near Zindagi and Rima. So they would be probably harder to reach than what people with learning disabilities would be as well.
Absolutely, and census engagement managers would love to pick up on any connections or contacts that you have that you think it's worth them pursuing as well. So if you just give me that little email and mention that you're from Rotherham area, and I will CC the census engagement manager in and kind of start the conversation for you.
Right, all right, thank you.
No worries.
Okay, next we had Marshall, who had a question about addresses. Marshall, did you want to ask a question?
I don't think I've applied for this. So how would I get the information if I'm not applied for it sent to my house?
Of course, no worries. So you don't need to apply for it. What we do is we spend a lot of time working with councils and lots of other organisations to build a big address book, essentially. So we know all the addresses that we need to send everything to. We don't necessarily know that you live there, so the letter will be addressed to Dear Householder. But we know that somebody lives at your address, so something will come in the post for you over the next couple of weeks. So you don't need to apply or sign up or anything like that. The only reason you might need to get in touch to chase us is if you haven't received a letter by, say, mid-March.
Okay, is that okay, Marshall?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll just, they've got a list of everyone's addresses. Okay, brilliant. Right, Pippa, moving now to the people who've got their hands up. So Pippa, did you want to go first?
Yeah, hello there, thanks now. Yeah, Emily, I just wanted to double check then. So are you saying that the way that people would get hold of a paper copy would just be having received their letter, they'd then have to request one, is that right?
Yeah, so in very few areas of the country, we can tell there's extremely low broadband take up, and those few people will be posted paper first. But everybody else who gets a letter, if you would like a paper questionnaire, you just need to either call the contact centre or you can order one by going on the website. Ironic, I know, but if you're kind of semi-okay with going online but you'd rather answer on paper, you can go on our website and you just literally like fill your address in and click can I have a paper questionnaire, and that will get posted to you, or you can telephone the contact centre and they'll help you out as well. Okay. The other option is if you what happens as later part of census is something I probably should have gone into a little bit more detail over, is that later on, so after the 21st of March, we do something called follow-up, which is where our system knows if we haven't received a response from an address. And so we have census officers who go and try and help people. They'll knock on the door and say, you haven't done your census, can I help you? Would you like a paper questionnaire? Would you like some more information? Can I tell you where your local support centre is? So if somebody hasn't done their census by later on in March, it's likely that someone will come and knock on their door. Those people will have paper questionnaires and can manually give them to somebody.
Okay, and just one other question as well. Just yeah, so you did say this, but just to be clear again, so if people live in a shared house, every person living in that house would complete their own census. Is that right? Their own form.
So the way it works is if you live in a household, so this we have a bit of a weird definition for a household, but essentially it's you could live alone or you could live with family or a group of people like flatmates that you may or may not know very well. But essentially if you're sharing cooking facilities and a front door with them and it's like a self-contained household, then you get one form, but we need to collect individual answers from everybody. So you'll be asked a set of questions about your accommodation, and then each person has the same set of questions for themselves to answer. If you don't want kind of to share that form or to kind of have your responses seen by somebody in the household, you will be able to request an individual questionnaire, either a code for an individual online questionnaire or an individual paper questionnaire, which is just the individual questions for you inside that household. If you live in managed accommodation in the sense of a residential home, so this isn't managed in terms of lots of flats with somebody who helps out over the top. This is like you might think of an older person's care home, that kind of thing. We call that a communal establishment, and the manager of that establishment will fill out about the accommodation. So everybody living there just needs to fill out an individual form, and that will all be sorted out and provided by census officers.
Sorry, I'm confused by what you're saying. I don't understand what you're saying. Everybody will fill in an individual form.
If you live in that communal managed accommodation setting, like a care home or a residential home, where it's a big kind of managed accommodation with staff and kind of carers and that sort of setting, the manager of that residence will fill out a questionnaire about the accommodation, and then all that's left is for all the residents to fill out a set of questions about themselves each.
So
and that will all be
so
provided to the home.
There are two types of form then?
Well, there's more than two, but the only ones that, because there's an English version and a Welsh version if you live in Wales, and it starts to get quite complicated. But all for the purposes of kind of for people kind of on the call knowing what they're going to receive, if you live in a household, even if you live with lots of people in that household, you all fill in the same form. There's questions about the accommodation and then questions for each person. If you live in that residential setting, that kind of care home setting, then the care home takes care of the accommodation questions and you just answer individual ones, and it will all be pulled through by the staff there.
All right, okay, thanks then.
Sorry, it gets a bit complicated, but it's the only way to kind of ask everybody the same questions and then pull all the data together.
Okay, Richard, you've had your hand up for quite a while. Did you want to ask your question?
Emily, good afternoon. My son has no mental capacity and he doesn't read or write. He lives in supported living, but where he lives is not where he is on the electoral roll. He's on my electoral roll. Does that make any difference? And who fills out his form?
It shouldn't make any difference in the sense of electoral roll, because we build our own address base, so we know about addresses. We don't know who lives at the address, if that makes sense. We know that we know certain addresses exist, but we don't know who stays where in them and so on. So all of the information will be addressed dear householder. So it doesn't matter to Census where he is on the electoral roll.
Yep.
If his accommodation, is it as I was describing when you say with assisted living, is it that situation where it's more a closely managed environment? Yes, with indeed. Kind of carers?
There are 3 tenants and lots of support workers.
Yeah, so it's likely in that situation he's in a communal, what we would call a communal establishment, in which case the manager would be asked to fill in accommodation questions, and then the individual questions would be for residents to fill in. But if he struggles to communicate, then we have in place kind of legally the ability to have people answer by proxy. So either friends, family or carers can kind of go through and, as best you can kind of communicate with him, or put the answers that you think that he would want you to put in the form. So people can answer on behalf of people like that and help people out. So it's kind of it's mixing and matching some of the processes together.
Emily, that makes sense. The manager fills out a form and I talk to her about who fills out Robert's form. Thank you very much.
No worries, thank you.
Okay, while we're talking about capacity, Donna, you had a question about capacity too?
Yeah, I think that might have answered it. Yeah, I mean, if I just say, so I'm from Seeability. We support people in supported living and residential settings, Emily.
Yeah.
But I'm also conscious that there are people who live on their own. I'm just a little bit worried about how you protect people from fraud and people knocking on people's doors and saying, I'm from the Census. I mean, we've seen it all with NHS, haven't we? Like fake texts and emails and so how are you planning to protect people? And also I think that people might be a bit scared about the legal obligations and I haven't had the letter, and then what do I do next, and I might be breaking the law, and I just feel like might need to be maybe some better communication about that. So
no worries. So in terms of the scam side of things, obviously we're very aware that that's a kind of something that people might see as an issue, and B, not nice people as an opportunity. But so there's a number of things. So first of all, Census will never ask you, officers and staff will never be asking you for email addresses, any of that kind of personal information. We don't know your name and we don't know any of your details, which is why we say dear householder on our correspondence. All of our correspondence has a code on it. So if you call the contact centre and say, oh, I've got this letter, I don't know what it is, they'll probably say, can you look in the bottom right-hand corner? There should be a code written sideways. And if you give them that code, it will validate that it's a real piece of contact. if you're in doubt at all, just call the contact centre, because, you know, they will escalate through to us if there's any issues. We will be monitoring things like social media constantly 24/7, and any kind of hint of somebody kind of phoning and reporting that they're not sure about something will get escalated to our incident process to be investigated as well. We're working with all the local authorities, and there's communications going out to the police this week, I think, to explain what's happening with Census and what people should be looking out for as well. Anybody knocking on anyone's doors, from a COVID perspective, will have all of PPE, and will only be doing that once lockdown rules allow them to. But also, they will have a Census badge, like a staff pass kind of thing. So if anyone's not sure, even if they get shown the badge and they still don't feel confident, just call the contact centre and they'll be able to kind of validate that that person is actually employed by the Census. So we have a lot of information about this. And how to kind of help people. There is a document that we've put in the finishing touches to, that kind of goes over any questions. So we know that some organisations might get questions from clients or stakeholders. So we're putting together a document where you can kind of refer to get signposted to all the kind of help and information that you need. So if you can't find something online, we can send this document out to Lisa and LDE to kind of share it more widely. It's less a thing to kind of put on Facebook and more a document to kind of refer to if you're getting questions from individual members of the public. So it's the kind of thing, like, as an organisational leader, you can like look at and kind of know which way to go to get the answers. But yeah, it's something that scams is something that we're aware of, and that we're putting lots of kind of things in place, and everything you should be able to refer back to the contact centre if you're not sure what it is, because ultimately if they're not on our systems, then it's not us, and we'll kind of pick that up and report it with you. So that was the scams. And what was the other part of your question? Sorry, it was the
the legal obligations. But as I'm going along, sorry, somebody else can ask this. How long does it take to fill in the census? Because if you're supporting people as well, it can be actually quite a lot for charity.
Yes. Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah. So it really depends on how many people are being included on each form. So as we were just talking about, if a number of people live together in a house, so a family or a couple of people are sharing a flat, it takes approximately, I think they say about 20 minutes per person, but obviously that will vary on how long the person would like to kind of spend thinking about their answers and processing what's being asked of them. Online tends to make it easier because it's literally just, you know, read the question, tick or write an answer, press next kind of thing, and you just get each question as it comes to you. Possibly paper will probably take a little bit longer because you've got to kind of absorb more of what's on the page, because there is a lot more going on the page on a paper form. And so therefore, if you've got a larger household, it will take a bit longer because you've got to do the questions for each person. But as I said, you can stop and go back to the form as well. So if you're in the online form, don't worry. If you need to go for a cup of tea, toilet break, you just want to finish it tomorrow, you can leave, and you just need your code to get back in again. And it's worth noting as well, if you lose your code, you lose your letter, you can't find it, you can always get another code. You just need to, again, call the contact centre or go online. You can even have your code texted to your phone, a brand new one. So not to worry. And it's just important to make sure that everybody knows not to kind of take a picture of their letter and like share it on Facebook or anything like that, because that code is your key to getting in the form. So make sure nobody else has it.
And the legal obligation, Emily, just the legal.
Sure. So the legal bit.
Say by law you're meant to have filled this in.
Yes. So
how threatening is it all going to get? Basically, well, it's true though, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Not at all in the beginning, because we would rather people do the census because they know what it is and they feel and they want to take part. Yes. We only refer to the legal stuff as you get towards the back end of census. So if you imagine census as a big like window of opportunity to take part, the window opens on Monday and it kind of like peaks towards the 21st of March, and then after the 21st of March all the follow-up happens where we try and kind of help people who haven't got round to it yet, and that will continue on for quite a number of weeks after census. So into April and May time we'll still be following people up, and although the noise in the kind of the press releases and the media will die down, we'll still be going out and saying, you know, please do this. we'll say please before we say you've got to do it. But what we will do is we'll be able to tell, as I've said, that if people have done, if a household's done their form, they won't hear from us again. We won't bother you again. If you get a reminder letter, the more reminder letters you get, the more they'll probably say it's a legal obligation, please do your census. But all the time, all of it will have help on it. So if somebody's frantically trying to do it and getting really worried and anxious about it, we want them to be able to get the help that they need and not feel, you know, so precious. So if someone's in a situation where they feel they should have got some kind of communication from us and they haven't, again, just get in touch and they'll look in the system and they'll be able to, all anyone needs to know is what their address is, and that they'll be able to then look and see if something's been done and what kind of address it is and so on. So there's lots of things in place to help people there and to kind of reassure them. And we definitely don't lead with, you must do this by law. I always tell people about it in my presentation because we've got to be upfront. I'm not hiding it. But we'd much rather have a conversation like this and say, actually, it's a really good thing to do. If you're worried about an aspect, tell me what that aspect is, and I'll see what things we've put in place to try and help you so that you can do it with autonomy and with confidence.
Thanks, Emily. All of you who have your hands up or have asked questions in the chat, I have got a list of you all. I will get to all of you. Jude, you've been very patient. Do you want to ask your question next?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just want to find out, how do we access the recording of this meeting?
I don't know that one. I'll pass that on to Rachel, I think.
After, I mean, maybe tomorrow, I'll have uploaded it to YouTube and I'll send it to everyone who's come and whose email I've got, and I'll send it out like that. And you'll be able to share that link with other people.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, next, Jeff, you've had your hand up for quite a while, and I know you have several questions. Do you want to ask each question separately, Jeff, so that Emily can answer each one? Sure, and then you can go on to your next point. Thank you.
And my main one was answered, or one of the big ones answered just now, about the legal obligation, but actually not completely. What happens if you're talking about reaching hard to reach groups? What happens? You said about sending letters to people if they don't complete the census. And because my first question was reaching hard to reach groups that we know from contact with COVID. We don't know a lot of people with learning disabilities who are living on their own but are now really struggling because of what's happened during COVID. They haven't got any support, no access to any, they're not, you know, known to services, never accessed services before. They are shielding, they won't accept someone coming to the door asking them questions. Are you sending letters to these people who won't be reading them because maybe having struggled to read letters as well? What will happen when it gets to that point where they haven't filled the census in and you've sent 10 letters to them and they've not replied because perhaps they can't reply or they're just not reading them? What will happen then? Where does it get to that point about, you know, we're going to take it a bit further, and what we're doing to engage in different ways?
Sure. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying there. So what will happen is that obviously letters will be sent, but also part of the field follow-up. I know people may be shielding and be worried about answering the door, but it's the kind of situation where if someone just wants to talk through the letterbox and to the census officer, they can show their badge, etc. Any kind of communication like that through, you know, through the window, those officers are there to try and help those individuals, particularly who are really nervous about those things. Those are the kind of situations where those visits to people, you know, as you say, if they're not accessing services, this could be some, you know, a very few and far between visit. They'll be there to signpost and get those people the help that they need. So, you know, they'll be making sure that they've got the easy read information leaflet, that they've got the telephone number, that they feel empowered to call the telephone number. As I mentioned in the presentation, there is the ability for advisors to help take questions, help take answers over the phone. We don't shout too loudly about that, because we want to make sure that the people who need that service are taking that service up. So if somebody calls and they're really struggling and they can't make an answer in any other way, then the telephone operators can kind of work through the process with them there. And of course, if they're in a situation where, you know, we get to a point where people feel confident going out, and you know, a centre near them, one of the census support centres open, they can absolutely go to that census support centre, take as long as they want to sit down and use the equipment there. If they can't access the internet themselves, if they don't have the technology or anything like that, all you need is the willingness to do the census, to go to one of these centres, and the advisors will sit down and help the person. Or if they've got a paper questionnaire and they want some help, again, you can take it with you and the centres will help them. And in terms of getting serious, you know, it's, you know, nobody's going to be punished for not being able to access the process. So if we get to a point where there's a house that has been identified as not responding and they're not responding to anything, obviously if we manage to open a line of communication, it's going to be about helping them to do the census rather than punishing them for not having been able to do it beforehand. So.
And I had a question, but it's left me now. Okay, so one question that I had was about the text relay thing. Is that you're saying that's mainly aimed at people who are hard of hearing or don't?
Yeah, it's a service that it used to be called. Oh no, I can't remember what it used to be called, but essentially it's a prefix that you put ahead of the telephone number, and it turns the conversation to text, so you can read it instead.
So someone who's autistic who would find text messaging a lot easier, could they use that?
Quite possibly. I don't think there's any limit on who can use it. Like nobody, I don't think anyone's banned from using it unless they are, you know, hard of hearing or deaf. It's more a case of it was specifically developed, I think, and is run by deaf users. So it just might be that some of the functionality, if it's read out at the same time, it might just sound a bit odd to somebody. You know, it won't necessarily kind of make the conversation you know, in an easy read format or anything like that. But then having said that, all of our contact centre staff they use all of the materials that we develop to answer their questions. Their advice to speak to people in plain English and be, you know, clear and not jargonistic and things like that. So it shouldn't get complicated.
Brilliant. And that was actually one question I'll bring together as to are your staff trained in supporting people with learning disabilities and autistic people?
That's a question I don't know the answer to. So as you can imagine, the census is a massive moving feast. So I can go away and find out a bit more about the exact training that's given to the contact centre staff, because off the top of my head, I don't know the answer. So I'll take that as an action to find that out for you.
And if not, for the future census, I think we'd probably all on the call here would welcome the opportunity to be able to work with you guys to make sure that in future there is some training. The other question that goes on to the Easy Read, was that produced with people with learning disabilities? Has it been?
Yes, so we worked with Easy Read UK to produce that, and then they subcontracted Easy Read Wales to produce the Welsh versions, and they put it through. So we've based it loosely around the information leaflet that comes with the letter or the questionnaire, and so everybody's getting this kind of the same information. There's a little bit extra in there in the Easy Read leaflet, so it covers a broad range of topics, and they put it through their user-led forums to kind of pick it apart as you will and make sure that the message that we wanted to get through was getting through.
No, that's great. That's good. That was something really clear. And yeah, I suppose just in the future, is there a chance for organisations like ourselves on the call to get involved in future in influencing the questions that the census asks and done so it's more accessible to people?
I think so. So basically, the census is a massive 10-year beast, if you imagine it. It all reaches this massive pinnacle every 10 years, and then they go into this phase where they do outputs, and then there'll be a process where they're thinking about what do we do for the next census. The question for the last 2 or 3 census has been, do we need to do a census like this again, or do we have enough technology and advanced data to be able to not have to bother people? But they'll go, first of all, they'll decide how we need to do the next census, if we need to do it like we're doing it now. And then after that, they go through a period of consultation of like how the census is put together, and they look at the questions and so on. And that's the bit where it's really important that everybody gets involved in the consultations that are put out there.
Well, how does that happen? Because I think I don't think anyone else has. Our organisation wasn't contacted. I don't know how that happens. I just think it'd be good to know how we can do
Sure.
that.
Well, what we can do is that obviously my team, I'll carry on working with Census kind of through and out the other side again, and then we want to engage people with the outputs and things like that. So what we'll be looking to do is make sure that any of our kind of contacts that want to kind of engage with the continuing process get to go along that journey as well. So we'll certainly be kind of sharing the, you know, links to groups like yourselves where we have your obviously GDPR permission and things like that, or if you've got public details, we'll be kind of making sure that that legacy goes on and wanting to connect to the next sections of work so that people don't get lost along the way.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, Victoria, Vicky, you've been really patient, and I think you've got a question.
Jeff has already answered all the questions I wanted to answer, so it's okay. And the ones I wanted to answer is if to do with people's lower hearing and can't hear, and people who's really struggling to fill the farm out, but Jeff's already answered it really.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. Okay, so Janet, you had a couple of questions, I think.
Hi, yeah, I was interested to know if after the 100 years, is the information then not anonymous? Is it attached to a name? And the other question was, if you fill in the form on a paper copy and you make a mistake, what would be, do you get a couple of copies, or would you have to ask for another one to be posted, or can you initial the mistake and correct it?
That is a really good question. Well, both of them are really good questions, actually. So I'm actually just going to really quickly, there is an example of the census questionnaire online, because it had to go out with the public legislation where census was kind of made into law. So I'm just going to see if really quickly if it says what to do in there, because as with all kind of government style things, it says how to fill out the form. Really quickly, just looking to see if I can find, use black or blue, tick your answers within the box like this, print in capital letters, correct any mistakes by filling in the box like this, and it's got a pick like a shaded box in. So it's given an example of like someone's put Smith and they put SMT and they've scribbled out the T and then immediately next carried on spelling Smith correctly. Yeah. So you just, as you would with any kind of these types of official forms, you properly black out the box that you've got wrong for where you're writing things in, and
there
continue.
Are instructions.
There are instructions. There's a good couple of pages at the front of the paper questionnaire that tells you all about what is a household, what do we mean by this, how should you fill it in, and so on and so forth. And then there'll be more detail on all of those pieces as well online to back you up. And if you can't use the online or you don't want to, you can ask the same questions of somebody over the phone as well. And it gives examples of like how to fill in people's names and things like that. And then your other question was about the records. So they become a whole record after 100 years. But what will happen is there'll be a process where they identify if anybody can be connected to that record. If they can't, they will redact it, which means they black out identifiable information. So for example, merchant navy records and Second World War records, you can, at the National Archives where these records go, you can get hold of a bit more recent records if you can prove that that person isn't alive anymore and has no way of kind of and that you're related to them, so it's like a family record. If it's not, then it will be redacted and you only see completely factual non-personal information. So they go through a massive process of kind of looking at the data and checking, and again, nothing gets released to the archives that is going to harm anybody. So you might think ONS's directive is to release data, but actually our directive is to protect people and their identity, and then underneath that we will release data only if nobody can be identified.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. Right, Marshall, I think you've got your hand up again. Did you have another question?
Yeah. What if someone is detained what about if someone is detained under Section 3 of the Mental Health Act and need a copy of it?
Good question. I think at the point of census happening, It probably depends how long someone's detained for. So if they are detained for the whole time that we're collecting census information, then it's likely they will be answering kind of through the place that they're staying, so through the institution or hospital that they're in. However, if they go home part way through, then their letter or their paper questionnaire will be waiting for them at home, and they just fill it in as they would normally.
Can I not fill out? Can I not fill out a form online to get it sent to the hospital where I'm at?
We can only send it to just households' addresses, because we don't necessarily know who you are. We just know that your address exists. So if you're not at your address at the moment, then it depends when you're going back to your address. So I think it depends how long you're staying away and so on. So it kind of depends on the parameters of your...
And what about if the person has no address in hospital, but the class doesn't pick a board?
So there's a couple of processes there for that. If somebody's in hospital, then that's going to kind of that's going to be, we call it enumerating, but enumerating is collecting data. The data will be collected by processes that are looking at hospitals and care homes and things like that. So it's that process of looking at places where lots of people are staying and giving them the opportunity to respond there. And if somebody outside of hospital doesn't have a fixed address, then there's a number of ways that they can respond, and it all depends on where they are going to be. So if you're staying at a friend's house, you can answer at the house that you're staying at. It's essentially any kind of whatever abode accommodation you're going to be in over census period, you answer for where you are there. So, you know, if you're staying in a hostel, you answer at that hostel. If you're staying on a friend's sofa, you answer on the friend's sofa. And there are some processes as well for people who live on boats, or people who live on, you know, caravans or traveling sites. And there's also some processes for people that are homeless. They can answer through some homeless hostels and centres. So it really depends kind of exactly what your circumstances are.
So you can't apply in a hospital then?
So in hospitals will get enumerated a bit like communal establishments, I believe. So if you're in a hospital, there will be a process around that hospital. But if you go home from the hospital during the time that census is happening, you can answer from your home address, because the letter will be waiting for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Dawn had a similar question about addresses. Can I just check, Dawn, did that answer your question, or... Yeah, okay, right, in which case, Pippa, I think you had a question.
Yeah, sorry, Emily, I was just thinking, is there any possibility of sending us a draft form that we can just have a look at, so we can kind of start to prepare people?
Sure. So the paper questionnaire is actually available online.
All right.
Already. I've literally just Googled, what did I type in? I typed in Census 2021 questionnaire, and it's about the second thing down, and it takes you to the Office for National Statistics rather than the Census website, because this isn't a questionnaire to fill out. This has got specimen written over it, and it's a version of the paper questionnaire that's uploaded along with information about the census legislation. So you can look at that as an example, and it would be the 2021 England household questionnaire that you'd be needing to kind of look at, although you can get a sense of the communal establishment and individual ones on there. As I say, the paper questionnaire looks a lot harder to take in than the online system. The only problem is that it's quite hard to demonstrate the online system, because you have to be able to have a code to get inside it. So you know, what we're looking to do is to kind of follow up with some information once the system is live. So I can, you know, later on follow up with Lisa maybe and give a few snapshots of some of the questions inside the questionnaire, so you can compare them to the paper and you can see how it looks different.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, I think that's everyone that I have who has a question, but is there anyone that I've missed? Okay, is there anything else that you wanted to add at this stage, Emily? It's probably worth me saying again, Learning Disability England will be putting up a news page at the beginning of next week, and we'll put the information into our newsletter as well, so that you can all see some of these resources that Emily's been talking about, and have sort of somewhere to go where you can find the information out quickly and easily. So if any of you have any easy read resources that you're already putting together as part of your groups on the census, and you're willing to share them with others, I'd be really grateful if you would send them through to me. So it's lisa.watchon@ldengland.org.uk, and then we can share them on the news page. Okay, Emily, is there anything? Oh, right, Janet, you've just put your hand up.
That's just made me think of something. When we're in the start of lockdown, the only way we could get our group together all as one was like as a conference call. And we found that facility really useful to support them to do a number of things, you know, like renewing the bus passes and things like that. Is there an option to fill the forms in for them on the Zoom? Does anybody know? You know, so you can be typing in the information and they're giving...
I mean, it's a difficult one, because it's about interpreting how much help you're going to kind of be able to offer somebody. So the only thing is, if you've got a group of people on a call like this and you're taking their personal questions, they're having to give their personal information out over like a shared call, and we, as I say, we're asking questions about, you know, age and national identity, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity. If they're over 16, people might not feel comfortable kind of giving that over the phone.
Sorry, I was thinking more of a, you know, on a one-to-one.
On a one-to-one basis. I mean, if you have the capacity to help your community, or, you know, in an official way like that, I don't think there's anything out there that prevents it. We do encourage friends, families, support organisations to get involved and support people, and it's just about kind of keeping the responses to that kind of safe. Obviously ONS isn't then responsible for kind of the servers that are being used and things like that, but if you have the capacity to support people like that and are able to, I mean, it's the kind of thing, you know, I might be able to do to help my nan and things like that. So yeah, so I think it's an option if you think people would take it up. It's not something we could run from our contact centre, but on a local level, if you're helping people more individually and you're using a platform like this to do it, then I'm sure going through in more detail would be something that they could benefit from.
So do you know, could you pull the form up and you'll be physically typing in while they're giving you the answer?
Well, you would have to have their code to put in the form, which is obviously we tell people not to share their codes, because as soon as you have a code, you can get in the form. However, if you're supporting somebody to do the census, then you're obviously kind of going to be in that trusted space. It's just making it clear to people not to give their code to any old person, in kind of like share it around. So if we get into a space where we can run what we would call completion activities, we were imagining in a pre-COVID world our census engagement managers would be very much coming to groups, group sessions that you might be running, and they would help people on that one-to-one basis. Obviously they can't do that now, but that means that there is a bit of an open window to help people like that. It's just a case of making sure that the person there understands that they're kind of giving their answers over that thing, and that they're happy to share their code and things like that. There is some information we're developing that will be online very soon about volunteering, that kind of gives a bit of advice about kind of what it means to kind of help somebody, and there's also advice about kind of helping somebody answer by proxy, as we call it, or kind of referencing kind of capacity and supporting people to take part, and just guidance on making sure that you don't interpret what they're saying in any way, or kind of change it to what you assume people want, when it's got to be kind of out as they identify out of their mouths what they say, kind of thing. So there's plenty of guidance and more coming to kind of help people help other people as well.
I think Anna just said that you can, screen share it. So if you've got it as a screen share and you've got the other person on the Zoom, can you, on the Zoom, can you be actually typing in and completing the form if it is a screen share?
There's nothing to stop you working with people like that. You know, if that's something that you've got the time to help people with, you've just got to make sure that they're clear that, you know, they're obviously sharing that personal information with you when they do that. And as I say, the guidance that will be going up very shortly about kind of volunteering your time to help people will just cover, you know, what that means in terms of making sure that you don't kind of pass information on and things like that.
So it would be a live document that you could fill in, even though it
so
wasn't.
Yeah, the electronic
document.
Questionnaire is a live document.
Yeah,
You type
right.
you type a code in, and that code gets inside that household's form. So, you know, if I took my neighbour's code and filled their form in, it is the form for next door that I would be answering for. But it is, as you say, it's a live document. You can leave halfway through and you use the code again, and it will take you back to where you were to carry on. But question by question, you're filling in the form as you go. So it's not like a PDF or anything like that.
Right, that's great. Thanks ever so much.
So we're almost running out of time now, but Jeff, I think you had one last question that you wanted to ask, following on from the question that we've just had.
I did. And that's about Zoom. So through COVID, we've all learned that for some people who've got access to technology, it's not everyone, that using things like Zoom is really good. And I think you just talked through how that's really possible. Jodie was suggesting, you know, you can use breakout rooms. So for advocacy groups, they could do that in teams almost and buddy up, so people could get support to access them. Is there any way, not now, but maybe for the future, the census teams locally could take advantage of that technology and use that? Is it possible at the minute? Teams?
So census engagement managers are absolutely encouraged to kind of do what we call kind of completion activities, and they, you know, they want to be, pre-COVID, they'd be going to groups, as I said, taking help with them, sitting down with people, guiding them through and so on. And they'll now be trying to put that help into a digital space. So whether it's attending, you know, meetings, you know, your local census engagement manager coming to meetings that you might be holding about the census, they can, you know, give you a bit more specific information. They could do a clinic and talk through questions. They could talk through some of the detail of the questionnaire, that sort of thing. Off the top of my head, I don't know what they're allowed to do in terms of taking people's answers. I don't know if they're allowed to do that, but if you work with them, they will know, because they're getting training like as we speak this week about how to kind of run digital completion sessions. So, you know, they can join Google Meets, they can't set up Zoom calls, but they can join Zoom calls, just because we've got a bit of limitation on Zoom for, you know, various government firewall reasons. Yeah, so they, you know, they're available to come to digital spaces and help you.
You know the contact centre.
Mm.
Is it first like an automatic system, or do you just run through? Because like our self advocates at work, a lot of people find that very, very hard to use and find it quite anxious because the system reads too quick.
Got you. So I think it starts with the system, but I think there's, you know, I haven't listened to the system myself, so I don't know the exact kind of structure, but there is a big contact center of people out there. So I'm confident that there is there's a way to there's a way to get through to speak to an advisor. I don't know if there's a shortcut, but you know, if people want to know, I can go and find out how you get to speak to an advisor quickly. I can take that one as a question and go and ask.
Yeah.
Just write that down for you. Get to speak to an advisor. I'll send the answers to that back to Lisa to share to you.
Are there any more questions, Donna?
Yeah, I just had a quick look on the questionnaire that Jeff kindly sent the link round to. And it doesn't look like supported living is on there, on the communal establishments. It just says care home or care home with nursing. So I just wondered if Emily could clarify.
It depends if supported living is considered a household or a communal establishment. So I think Lisa and I talked this through the other day, actually, and it gets a little bit complicated, but we define a household. Let me open up the paper questionnaire because it says what a definition of a household is. A household is one person living alone or a group of people not necessarily related living at the same address who share cooking facilities and share a living room or sitting room or dining area. So if supported living is essentially households and somebody comes to help them, even if that's in a paid management position, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a communal establishment. So a communal establishment is much more like your more regulated, managed accommodation care home example. If you're not sure and you're worried about a set of housing that you're aware of, come Monday, I would call the contact centre and say, I don't know if this is a communal, if you consider this a communal establishment or not, because they'll look on their lists and their lists would say whether they think it's a household or a communal establishment, and that will allow you to anticipate what type of approach is happening there. But I will take away a question about supported living to my colleagues who kind of cover this area.
I think it's just, it would be really good for just some Q&A clarity on
Yeah.
that. Most people with learning disabilities who do use a type of social care, you know, establishment, use supported living rather than care.
How would you define supported living? So is it households with like regular paid support, would you say?
Yeah, but so also staff sometimes will be staying on site, so it's not just that there's somebody, you know, sort of managing the service that pops in, or staff popping in. Actually, people are often sleeping there as well.
Yeah, okay. So this might be one of the examples where it almost straddles a little bit of our definitions there. So what I'll do is I'll take that question to my colleagues who like run that team, who do the communal establishments, and I will I'll ask them for an answer and I'll send it back to Lisa for you.
Is anyone who's just put their comment in the chat would like to say it out loud, or any other final questions? Janet?
Yeah, I'm from working a Camp Hill community, and we're running daily Zoom sessions for people within our community. Is there a possibility for one of your reps to maybe go through some of this?
Absolutely.
Is it possible for us to arrange for that, sir?
Absolutely, definitely. So if you pop us an email to that engagement address that's at the end of the presentation, and say the area that you're working in, I will respond and CC in the person working in your area.
Lovely. Thank you.
Alison, I don't know whether you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, well, I didn't know how to put my hand up, so I thought I'd just put things in the chat box. Yeah, I mean, I manage a supported living unit, but all our people have their own tenancy. They live in their own self-contained flats, although all the flats are in one building, and the building is manned 24 hours a day with staff. So I'm assuming, maybe incorrectly, but all our individual service users will get their own individual tenancy, their own individual census letters, because they all hold their own individual tenancies.
It sounds to me like that. It sounds to me like they've got their own address. And even if it's a couple of people living in a flat, to me that sounds like a household answer for each of them rather than a communal establishment one.
It's supported living is very broad. A lady previously described a different setting where people share one house, whereas our setup is people hold their own tenancies, they have their own self-contained accommodation, and we also support people in the community as well. So, but they will, my understanding of this is they will get their own individual letters, and then we will support them with filling that in whatever format is best for them. So,
yeah, it very much sounds like that's going to be a household situation for them, meaning they will get their own approach each. I will, as I say, go back to my colleagues and say, look, I will ask them specifically about supported living and try and get a bit more of a clearer definition from them, so that you can kind of look at it and say, well, I fit on this end of the spectrum, therefore I think it's going to be like this. So I'll try and get something more specific sent out via LDE for you.
Any final questions?
Vicky had her hand up.
Vicky?
I just wanted to quickly ask, Jeff has probably already answered it, but I'll answer it anyway. My mum and dad live in a bungalow together, and they've both got learning disabilities. Not just about the low hearing from my mum. It's just, but like, I know I'm not actually supposed to go to their house because of the virus, but is there any how would I be able to support them and do it for us if they came to my house and they got support from where I work at Speak Up? Because they both can't read, and they would struggle to fill the form in. And my mum's got low hearing.
And they haven't got any internet access either.
No, they haven't. They've got no internet access at all, and they've got a mobile, but my mum and dad are not very good at speaking on the phone. They can speak clearly, but they will struggle to understand things. So I was wondering, I know it might be breaking the rules, but if I could get him to come to my house and I did it for Zoom and someone supporting from work.
Well, I think that I can't encourage you to break the COVID rules, but obviously remember that the rules look like they might be changing over the next couple of weeks anyway, and you do have quite a while to do your census form. So as I say, people will start receiving letters from Monday, but not everybody will get their letter straight away on the Monday. And we encourage you to do it as soon as possible. But if you tell your mum and dad to look out for this and to save their letter when they get it, if you could even on a bright sunny day go and have a chat with them in the garden. And if you've got like a smartphone, you can help them from the garden. There's all sorts of things that you can do in that way. I would advise to kind of think as inventively as possible about how you can do that. And it sounds like soon you will be able to kind of almost like meet up to be able to have a chat about it as the rules start to relax as well. And the other thing is, if you're aware of any support they have, if they work with any organisations or they might have carers or something, the other thing you can do is have a word with them and kind of try and support them and get some information to them that way. But I think that things are going to start to open up, which should help your kind of situation. Where it's easier to kind of physically be with them in some way. Obviously I can't tell you to break the rules. We shouldn't be doing that, but it sounds like things are going to relax to give you some opportunities by the sounds of it.
Yeah, okay, I won't actually asking you to do that. I'm just saying, but like, because the situation, because like normally your Speak Up was open, they would go to the building and they would get someone to fill in for them. But because we Speak Up is closed and we've got to do everything for Zoom, my mum and dad can't do that because they don't have no internet connection and they've only got one phone. But like I just said, they struggle to speak on the phone to anybody. It's mostly like, if I was with them, they would pass the phone to me and ask me to speak on their behalf. But it's not simple, like you just said, because of the virus.
Yeah, I would also, have a look at what it says on the website as well about helping people. I can't find the exact page, but I'll try and find it and share it to Lisa. But in the help area, it does explain how to help people that you would, that are going to really struggle in that situation, how you can kind of help them answer on their behalf and things like that. So there's a bit of guidance that explains that to you. So that might also open up some doors for you there as well. So there'll be a way through, but I'd have a little look at what it says about helping people, possibly answer on their behalf or by proxy and things like that.
Thank you.
No worries.
Michelle?
Sorry, I appear to be in space. I don't have to take it off. Just a quick one. When the officers are coming round knocking on the door, will they have like an easy read introduction to themselves, or will they be getting a phone call first to let people know that they come in?
So I don't think people will get a phone call because we know where people's addresses are, but we don't necessarily know what telephone numbers or personal contact information is linked to that address. And that hopefully should be a reassurance to people that we don't know who they are and that we're not like stalking them or anything. But the officers have various bits of information available to them. Off the top of my head, I can't remember if they have the Easy Read information leaflet to hand or not. But I can again take a little note to find out. And but they do have a kind of a bit of a spiel that they work through to introduce themselves. And it's, you know, because obviously they work with all sorts of people whose, you know, English is a second language to them and stuff like that. So their kind of script or their kind of introduction to people has been developed to be easy to understand and to help people feel comfortable, and they just want to kind of help point people in the right direction. So I can't say if it will be Easy Read itself because I don't know if they've got the leaflet on them, but what they say is designed to kind of open a line of communication to people.
Yeah, it's just people I work with, we run a forum, and one of the main things they're always bringing up is that they just don't like people just turning up. They'd like to know in advance that they're coming. So will they know that someone's going to be coming to the door? Is it just going to be a complete surprise to them?
As far as I'm aware, they're not what's it called, phoning ahead. I think if you're not in or you don't answer, they put a card through saying that they visited and that they will try and come back again. So I think that might help if someone hears a knock and is nervous about opening the door or not comfortable in that moment. I don't think they pre-warn, precisely because, as I say, we don't know who's in that house and we have very limited ways of contacting that person. We just know that that address exists and we need to collect the data from it. So yeah, it's partly because we don't have anyone's telephone numbers or anything like that. We have much less data on people than people think, especially their personal information. So, but certainly, as I say, I'm pretty sure they leave a calling card behind if they have, if they've not been answered, and they will try again another time. And I, off the top of my head, I'm not sure if they put when they'll try again on that calling card, but it should tell people who that person was if they didn't answer.
Are they only like going out in different hours? Like, have they got a set time that they'll be out calling?
Well, I don't think they'll be working at like 3 in the morning, so it'll mostly be like roughly working hours. I think they will be working on weekends. And what they essentially do is, our system obviously knows when somebody's done the census for that household, and it like ticks them off, and it's for the households that they don't have a response from, or they've got a partly finished online response. The ones in their area will get sent to their special device, and it will say you need to go and visit these addresses because we think they need help. Like we haven't had a response from them, so that's how they get their list of addresses through. But as I say, we don't know who lives at those addresses, so you know, they kind of have to do as much as they can on their feet at that moment in time to support that person when they go to the different addresses.
Any final questions? I mean, I'm sure if you come up with some later, Emily will be happy to be emailed. Any last ones? No? Well, thank you all for coming today. I know it was quite late notice, but there's loads of you here and you've asked loads of really good questions. I think I feel like I've got a lot more clarity on what's going on. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Emily, for answering everyone's questions. I think it's been
Thanks for having me.
And we'll get a recording and the slides sent out to everybody either today or tomorrow. We'll have some pages going up on Monday with all the bits once they've gone live. And I'll send you something out then as well, so you can get the link straight away. So thank you all for coming, everyone, and hopefully see you at some future events. See you later. Thank you.